Hi, this is Corey Franklin with Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with Steuart Pittman, who died recently at the age of 93. And Steuart Pittman was the head of the American Fallout Shelter program in the early 1960s. To understand about fallout shelters during the Cold War, I'm going to play a snip from a Rod Serling penned Twilight Zone episode that aired in September 1961. It's called The Shelter, and it starts with a family loading water to go downstairs to their fallout shelter.
How much more time is there?
There's no telling, Grace, honey. Conrad says from the first alarm we might have anywhere between 15 minutes and a half an hour.
15 minutes.
I'm just winging it, Grace. I don't know for sure. I don't think anyone does. Now keep filling them.
Bill, there's no more water.
Doesn't make any difference anyhow. I think we've got enough water. You bring a jug with you, Gracie. Paul and I'll get the rest. Now, you two stay here. I'll get the rest of the water. Paulie, there's a small toolkit in the garage. Will you run out and get it?
Right.
I'll get the rest of the water. Grace, now, if it is a bomb, there's no assurance it'll land near us. And if it doesn't, we'll
But if it does, Bill, New York is only 40 miles away. And New York's going to get it. We know that. So we'll get it, too. All of it. Poison, the radiation, the whole mess. We'll get it.
We'll be in a shelter, Grace, and with any luck at all, we'll survive. We've got food and water enough to last us for 2 weeks. Maybe even longer if we use it wisely.
Then what, Bill? We crawl out of here like gophers to tiptoe through all that rubble up above? The rubble and the ruin and the bodies of our friends? Bill, why is it so necessary to survive? What's the good of it? Wouldn't it just be better and easier, just quicker if we just...
I got the tools, Pop. Anything else you need from out here?
Grace, that's why we have to survive. That's the reason. He may only inherit rubble now, but he's 12 years old.
This is Conrad, your emergency broadcasting station.
How's it going, Bill?
Well, it's going fine, Jerry. We're collecting water, which is what you should be doing.
Well, we collected about 30 gallons and then the water stopped. Did yours stop, too?
Jerry, you better get on home and get into your shelter, into your basement. And I'd board up the windows if I were you. You got any wood money or anything?
Bill, we don't have any cellar, remember? The advantage is modern architecture. We got the only brand new house in the block. We
I'm
get
sorry.
everything at your beck and call, everything at your fingertips. Even got an electric laundry room right off the kitchen. All the wonders of modern science taken into account except that thing that's heading for us right now.
Jerry, come on.
Can I bring Martha and the kids over here?
Over here.
Well, we're sitting ducks over there. Sitting ducks, we don't have any protection at all.
Oh, Jerry. You can use our basement.
Your basement? What about your shelter? We've got to get into a shelter. It's the only place we can survive.
I don't have any room, Jerry. There's not near enough room or supplies or anything. It's designed for 3 people.
Well, we'll bring our own food. We'll bring our own water. We'll sleep standing up if necessary. Please, Bill, you've got to help me. I've got to keep my family alive. We won't use any of your stuff.
What about air? That's a 10-by-10 room, Jerry, with an air filter designed to supply 3 people. Will you bring your own air?
Well, just give us a chance.
No,
to the right one.
no.
48 hours, Bill, then we'll get out.
When that door gets closed and locked, it stays closed and locked, Jerry. There'll be radiation and heaven knows what else. Oh, I'm sorry, Jerry. As God is my witness, I am sorry. But I built that for my family.
Well, what about mine? What do we do? Just walk on the front porch and run to a crash?
That's no concern of mine. Right now, at this given moment, it's my family I have to worry about.
Do you think I'm going to stand by and watch my wife and children die in agony? I'm not going to do it. Do you understand, Bill? I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry, please forgive
I
me.
kept telling you, Jerry. All of you, get ready. Build a shelter. Forget the card parties and the barbecues for maybe a few hours a week. Forget them and make the admission to yourself that the worst was possible. But you didn't want to listen, Jerry. None of you wanted to listen. To build a shelter was to admit to the kind of age we lived in, and none of you had the guts to face that. So now you've got to face something far worse, Jerry. So God, please, God, protect you, Jerry. It's out of my hands. It's simply out of my hands. It's got to be done. It's got to be done.
Well, obviously, Rod Serling was more than just a science fiction writer. He was a social commentator. And here he discusses the program on Los Angeles radio, KNX, with a wacky disc jockey who happened to be Bob Crane, later of Hogan's Heroes.
KNX box the time, 20 and a half before 10. We promised 13 different people this morning we would ask you this question about a Twilight Zone that was on about a month or so ago. It was concerning fallout shelters. Now, on this, you must have had quite a bit of reaction.
We had 1,300 letters and cards inside of 2 days. I think we hit some kind of a nerve. It was a show called The Shelter about a doctor who had, the only guy in the neighborhood who had the presence of mind and the foresight to build a shelter.
Yeah.
And when there's a yellow alert sounding, why, he runs into the shelter with his wife and child, and all the neighbors are left high and dry. And they turn into animals. I used the show. I wrote it because I felt, number one, it had great immediacy. We've been talking at home, my wife and me, about the possibility of building a shelter.
Yeah.
We were struck with the moral and ethical problem of what would happen if, there were an alert sounding.
Yeah.
We got into our shelter happily because we built one, and neighbors with children came to the door and said, please let us in. Well, that was the problem. I can't answer it. I don't know what is the ethical rightness and justice of this. I haven't figured it out yet.
It is a very controversial thing because I saw a panel discussion just about a week or so ago on this, and they had some learned men on the panel, one gentleman with civil defense, another who was in the clergy, Catholic priest, a Jesuit priest, and they all had different opinions. One gentleman said in particular, until the government starts building them themselves, public shelters, I can't see where there's this immediacy is here. Why should I go out and spend $2,000 or $3,000 to build one if the government isn't bothering? This was his feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine when I saw your show that night, which was this problem in its most dramatic terms. Here was a family in their shelter, as you said, and here were the neighbors. What do? You carry a gun with you, shoot them off, or what do you do? And your show finally ended. How did it ended now with it was a false alarm.
It was a yellow alert, which turned out to be nothing. But I think the essence of our philosophical comment at the end was that for the human race to survive, it has to remain civilized.
Now, was that the ending that you wanted to take, or did you want it to leave it a little bit stronger?
No, because I'm not one of those, quote, knowledgeable men, Bob. I don't know. I was up in the air about it, morally and ethically. I didn't know how to end that thing. I didn't know what position, philosophically, I could take.
Are you yourself building the shelter?
No, we're not now.
Were you?
For a while, we thought very seriously of it. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And now we've decided that, no, we're not going to build it.
Why?
Well, for very realistic, stringently realistic reasons, that it's my feeling now that if we survive, what do we survive for? What kind of a world do we go into? If it's rubble and poisoned water and unedible food, and my kids have to live like wild beasts, I'm not particularly sure I want to survive in that kind of a world. This is the Happy Show, Bob, and yak it up again, Bob.
No, but
Gotta wonder what Rod Serling thought of Hogan's Heroes when it went on the air. Anyway, Steuart Pittman was made the head of the Fallout Shelter program by John Kennedy. You heard them talking about the government intervention. This is all Cold War, early 1960 stuff, and here's a brief government report that Steuart Pittman helped put out.
Here is the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Civil Defense, Mr. Steuart L. Pittman.
The shelter survey is the first step in a nationwide effort to assure that every American will have a place to go in the event of a nuclear attack. Extensive studies of many different types of simulated nuclear attacks have established quite clearly that tens of millions of lives will be saved if shelter space for the entire population is made available. Fallout radiation could spread over most of the country. It would reach very much further than the blast and fire in the vicinity of an explosion. There's only one protection from radioactive fallout: shielding provided by bricks, concrete, earth, whatever material will stop the penetrating gamma rays. The building you live and work in may provide some of this shielding. We plan to make the most of those buildings which can cut off harmful doses of radiation. For example, the central core of many of the buildings in your community, schools, office buildings, hospitals, could offer the best protection against fallout. Some of this shelter space can be in the upper floors of high buildings. Shelters are not all underground. The search for this protected space will reach your community. We want you to know how this is being done and why. I urge you to cooperate with your local civil defense officials on this survey and in the development of a plan to complete the task of sheltering your entire community from fallout radiation.
Here's another part of the report telling you how seriously this was taken by the government.
Along with a 2-week supply of survival rations, each shelter will be provided with sanitation and medical supplies. It will also be stocked with radiation detection equipment. The provisions shown here are being stored in Washington's Union Station, one of the pilot stocking programs established in 14 cities throughout the country. Finally, every community shelter like the one located in this school building will be marked with these yellow and black signs. These signs will be posted outside, inside, and on access routes of every building that has met the federal requirements for providing protection from radioactive fallout.
I'm going to close on Steuart Pittman and the fallout shelters of the Cold War. But lest you think this was all fantasy, I'm going to play a report from ABC Channel 7 in Chicago on what happened just last year.
The discovery of buried treasure always stirs the soul, and recently on Lower Wacker Drive, construction crews found a stash of history that dates back to the Cold War. ABC 7's Frank Matthey has more.
In the 200 block of South Wacker Drive, we find that construction isn't always about the future. Sometimes it's about the past. We visited Lower Wacker with project managers from the Department of Transportation, and they took us on a trip into history to a nuclear fallout shelter from 1962.
During the demolition process, we pulled down one of our walls and uncovered this amazing find.
I mean, there it was? Just all of this?
Yes, just standing there waiting for us to pull the wall down and discover it.
Those were the days when CD stood for civil defense and not compact disc. Everything was here to help people survive radiation from nuclear attack. Barrels of water, medicines to cure minor illnesses, and several sanitation kits to make life just a little bit more comfortable.
Inside here is a complete kit for basically a portable bathroom. And complete instructions how to use it.
It's not known how many people could survive here or for how long, but at least they would have smelled nice. If you're old enough, you remember the Cold War from the 50s and 60s. We had the H-bomb, the Russians had it. Then along came the Cuban Missile Crisis. Fallout shelters, they were surprisingly common. Some people built bomb shelters for their homes, and many businesses, as you can see in this YouTube video, turned their sub-basements into shelters where the main diet was survival biscuits, now 50 years old.
Not too bad. Actually pretty good.
The present owners of the building knew nothing about this, so it must go back to the original owners.
Our assumption is that when they built this building, they built it up to the Wacker Drive viaduct wall. And they used that wall for their exterior. And so they had walled it off on the inside, and no one knew what was in there.
Chicago museums have been contacted about this strange treasure. So far, no one is interested.
Yeah, why would a museum want that? It's interesting how lightly they take it today and how seriously they took it back in 1961. We're going to move on now to Cleotha Staples, who died recently at the age of 78, and she was part of God's greatest hitmakers. The Staples singers, along with her father, Pop Staples, her two sisters, and her brother. Cleotha's father, Pop Staples, was steeped in gospel music. He moved the family from the Mississippi Delta up to Chicago, a common trek in the 1930s, and for 20 years they played gospel music with Pop's playing guitar. As Sister Mavis's voice matured, she became the lead singer. Cleotha and her sister and her brother were the backup singers, and gradually their gospel sound turned to soul, R&B, and ultimately became popular as rock and roll. They're a great example of the gospel church music from the South that was honed on the south side of Chicago and ultimately became mainstream. But it was a rough road. There was a huge amount of competition that people don't realize, and their talent and their social consciousness is what elevated them above many of the other groups. When I talk about their social consciousness, before they hit it big, they took a pure white boy song, Stephen Stills' For What It's Worth, in 1966, which wasn't about the Vietnam War, as people think was about the closing of a Sunset Strip nightclub. But the Staples singers did a nice cover, made it a racial anthem particularly appropriate in 1967. Their breakthrough hit was a black empowerment song written by Luther Ingram in 1971, Respect Yourself.
Respect yourself. Respect yourself. Respect yourself. Respect yourself. If you don't respect yourself, ain't nobody gonna give a good respect yourself.
Of course, their big kahuna, their #1 R&B and pop, a national smash. It's about taking it to a better place. I'll take you there.
I know a place. Hey, come on, somebody help me now. I'll take you there. Hit me, y'all. I'll take you there. Hit me now. I'll take you there.
They They switched labels and hooked up with Curtis Mayfield and recorded this one, which was a number 4. Pretty good song, too. Boy, you can hear Curtis Mayfield all over that one. Of course, they covered Curtis Mayfield's classic composition, People Get Ready, along with the Reverend Al Green.
People get ready. There's a train coming. Don't need no ticket. You can just step on board. All we need is a little faith to hear the diesel running. We ain't got to have no baggage there. We can just thank the Lord. You tell them.
That's a good one. Wish I could play the whole song. Well, it's my show, so I get to play my favorite Staples singer song. It's about taking it to a world where there's racial harmony and no war. Come go with me. Fabulous song.
You're ready.
Well, Cleotha and her family are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in my opinion, the Staples singer's greatest performance was part of the 1976 Martin Scorsese movie, The Last Waltz, about the last performance of the band where they got all the great musicians from the 1960s and 70s there, and the Staples singers jammed with Robbie Robertson, Levon Helm, and the boys on the band classic, The Weight.
Take a load off, baby. Take a load for free. Take a load off, baby.
Cleotha Staples and her family, and that's a performance you got to catch on film sometime. Check out The Last Waltz, and of course check out our podcast on Levon Helm. We're going to leave Cleotha Staples and close tonight with W. Watts Biggers, who died recently at the age of 85. He created one of the great Saturday morning cartoons of all time for General Mills and NBC, Underdog. You've got to love Underdog. It featured Wally Cox as Underdog and some guy who was doing an impression of Lionel Barrymore as Simon Bar Sinister.
One of the city's most humble and lovable characters was Shoeshine Boy.
All finished, sir.
Thanks, Shoeshine Boy. You're humble and lovable.
Bless you, sir.
Little did anyone know that whenever there was a call for help, Shoeshine Boy became, in real life, Underdog. Sweet Polly Purebred, while investigating rumors of a snowman in July, had fallen into the clutches of Simon Bar Sinister.
You shall be my most beautiful snow. Prepare yourself, Simon says. Come along, sweet Polly. We have work for you.
Help! Help!
Meanwhile, high in the sky, the fearless Underdog was searching desperately for Simon Bar Sinister.
There's no need to fear. Underdog is here.
Let me tell you, the Macy's Day Parade hasn't been the same since they took the Underdog float out of it. We're going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. And as a final tribute to W. Watts Biggers, we're going to close with the theme song he wrote for Underdog, arguably the greatest cartoon theme song ever written. Here it is with the speed of lightning and the roar of thunder.
And in this world the headlines read of those whose hearts are filled with greed, who rob and steal from those who need to right this wrong with blinding speed goes Underdog, 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 speed of lightning, roar of thunder, fighting